Next up is the front bumper. This is the one that was on it, and because I listened to somebody who told me that my 74 had a 75 front end on it. I bought the wrong bumper for it when I was doing it, but it was so cheap I decided not to send it back, so I have this new one. And this old one has, for unknown reasons, because it's solid behind this, there's a hole right in the middle of it, which the new one won't have. So what I've done already is I've compared all the holes to the new one has dimples. Now it's interesting that they have dimples where it appears that all of the bolts go through, but there are a couple of spots that, like here and here, that appear to be just there to mount the plate that goes on here and holds the rest of the bottom trim of the front end. Those don't have dimples, so I don't know why. The other thing is the original bumper has two holes right near the center. The replacement does not have dimples in those locations. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's dimples here and here, but nothing in the center. So somehow I'm going to have to try and figure out where to drill those holes. The other thing to note if you're doing this project is these holes are much bigger than the studs that go through it, even if you have the original equipment on it. And they have to be bigger, I learned by doing the 74, because otherwise you can't get the stud through the hole, and the plate that the stud is attached to go up in there because of the angle. It's not a 90-degree angle. It's probably only about a, I don't know, 65, 70-degree angle you have to work with there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to let that last coat of paint dry on that bracket. There's a metal bracket that goes through the bottom here. Gives it some rigidity, which the new bumper doesn't need it because it's a fiberglass flex buff bumper. It's a little more rigid than the original, but it still probably needs it. So I am going to shut the camera off and go get a drill and start drilling out those dimples. So I've got a 3/16 drill bit that should be plenty big enough for number 10 stud to go through. And I'm going to demonstrate that by drilling this out and then trying to put one in. And that was a bad place to start because that requires one of the other studs with the short thing. I'll do it here. So if you put the stud in from this side, it's big enough to go through. It's a close fit, but big enough. From the other side, though, because of the angle, you can't get that through. Maybe I can. It's very close though. It'll be a lot easier if I just step it up a fraction or two. So since that's easy to drill, I'm just going to drill right away with the bigger size. It's not like I have to bring it up. I might get myself into trouble doing this because I'm just stepping it up a 64th of an inch. And the reason I say I might get myself in trouble is I might get it on the cart and I'd have to take it all back off. And that's interesting. That's 64th of an inch. I guess as I pushed the stud through, it made it that big already. So we'll go up to, I'm sorry, that was the wrong bit. That was the one that I had drilled it with. That was a 3/16. I think I'll probably end up being at least drilling it. Okay, now the holes in the body are bigger, so there's wiggle room there. And as I did on the back bumper, they're sliding off on me. As I did on the back bumper, I'm going to take these little retainers and push them on so that when I go to put this in the car, it will actually not move. I may have to make some of these holes a little bit bigger because I'm sure that the angle is not quite the same on all of these. But I'm taking a little deep socket, press that on, the stud's installed. So I'm going to repeat that all the way, basically across the top and down the sides. The bottom is different, so I'm going to put all of those studs in, and this one here then I might have to take it over. Switching topics again here. This one here requires one of the ones, and I thought these were for the corner, but it requires one of the ones where the stud is offset. I may have to go take this and put it on the car and mark those two center studs. So I'll repeat that with all the ones I can. Go put it on the car, mark these two, and install the studs there. And then it'll be time to see about putting that bracket that I've been painting on. A couple of quick notes on this process. I ended up resorting to using a 5/16 inch drill bit for all of these because it was very difficult to get them through these, and in some cases I had to resort to helping them with a pair of channel locks. Those went in pretty easy. But another thing is, as you recall, on my back bumper I tried to salvage the long bracket that was stock, and in installing them I pushed a couple of the ones that I had tried to glue back into the long bracket. I pushed them back out and they were difficult to tighten. Well, it turns out that these things, brand new ones, also push out of the socket. I've pushed two of them out just trying to push the retainer on. So it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to push those out of the socket. Then what I'm doing now is I'm using my deep socket on the retainer, and I'm trying to get a pair of large channel locks to the back side so that it pushes on the actual stud. That's one of those things where you need 3 hands for it. But basically, you can tell it's going to take quite a few tries. But basically, regardless of whether you go with a new original equipment style bracket or you go with these ones that are individual ones for each hole, you got to be careful that you don't push them out. So what I would recommend is using these little retainers on all of them so that you don't push them out while you're attempting to screw them in. There's too many things to hold. If I can just hold something up against the back of that, push it on with the socket, maybe I don't need to clamp it in with the channel locks like I was trying to do. If I can just support the stud from behind. There is a square hole in there, so if you get the stud into the square hole, and I can probably do this now that I've got it started. Get the square stud in the hole, and then get this retainer pushed on all the way. That'll keep it from popping out as you screw it in. So, got 3 more of these to go. Probably been working at it 45 minutes or so. 3 more of these, and then I got to do the 2 that are up in the nose. It turns out there are 2 brackets that, and I don't know if I have the correct side. Yes, I do have the correct side. They go in the bumper somewhat like that to support this corner. And I had put those on when I was putting the crash bumper on down in the shop in the barn. There are 2 big 5/8 head bolts that hold it there, and then there's one that goes there's a stud sticking out of the crash bumper that goes through there, and the 9/16 nut goes on that. Those have to be off, otherwise the bumper won't fit across the, it won't fit over them to put it on. So the fitting of the front bumper is not very accurate. I do need to enlarge holes somewhere, so here's what I've decided to do and how I'm going to approach it. I've marked with tape where each of the studs needs to come through, and those, as you can tell, are offset. The slots in the backing piece to that are not as big as the slots in the front, so I'm going to have to drill holes there. And what I've done on the front, where I need to put 2 more studs in, is I've marked where those, let's see if I can get my light on there, where those 2 are, and I tried to mark the center of it. So I'm going to drill holes in the bumper to put the studs in, and I will clean up all these holes and make them align better. So I'm going to do that probably off camera because there's not much room to set up a tripod here. Well, it's kind of on. It's to the point where as I tighten those studs, it'll pull it in. But I kind of got ahead of myself. I forgot about this piece that I had painted that needs to go on to that bumper. So I'm going to have to see if I can squeeze this in while it's on there, and go from there. So here's where I got to yesterday on that bumper. I enlarged those holes and made the slots where the screws could go in. Now I'm not sure that none of the threads are actually touching the edge of the screw hole, so maybe if I try to put the nuts on them and it might draw it in. But there's also a plate that goes under here that attaches the next thing, and there were dimples in the bottom here that I drilled holes for at the dimples, but it was, number one, difficult to get that plate up in there with the bumper halfway on, and number two, if you put it up there and it wasn't fastened in place, then it might move and then make it difficult to put the next piece, which has a little spoiler that goes under there. You know, if that plate's moving around and you can't hold it in place. So what I think I'm going to do is take this off, and then I'm going to line up those holes with the holes in the plate, and I should get you, let me see where I put the plate. It's up on the lift. So this is the plate, and those screw holes should align with that. So I think I'm going to screw those in. It goes above the bumper here, the part of the bumper. So I think I'm going to take this off, screw them in so that those holes are aligned, and then with these other holes here, these are not threaded, those are for probably, this is a threaded one, this is not. So there's like 4 holes that you can pop rivet it in place so that it stays put when you put it in. And I think that's what I'm going to attempt, but it is troubling that I can't really easily get that bumper to mate up against the body, even without this plate. So I'm going to have to work at that and see if I can figure something out. And while I have this off, maybe I'll try to fit the original bumper, which doesn't have any studs in it, just to see how easily it goes on and mates up, and then go from there. So what I've done is I've put the old bumper on without the studs, and it can be made to fit. And I think I have discovered what the difficulty is with putting the fiberglass flex bumper on. And trying to do this with one hand, and it's not working too well. If you notice, I can't pull it off, and I will show you why once I get it off. You see this little lip in here? It's got a curve up, and this more flexible bumper, it goes over that pretty easily because it bends back. The more rigid fiberglass bumper, which even though it says flex, has difficulty bending over that. So what I may have to do is just trim off a little bit of the bottom of that lip on the fiberglass bumper. Like I said, this one's much more flexible. It's easier to put on, but you can see how it has a lip. That will bend over that lip. The other, less flexible one doesn't want to go over it so easily. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to put that plate on, riveted in place, and then I'm going to make an attempt to see if I can somehow get that flex bumper to flex enough to get it over that lip. But if not, then I think the solution is going to be to take my die grinder, which I used yesterday to enlarge those slots where this goes in. And you've seen me use the die grinder to make the bracket fit for the air conditioner fit over the header. But basically, little grinding wheel spins really fast. It will make short work of that. The biggest problem will be holding the bumper steady, because I don't want to trim that metal piece. I would trim the fiberglass piece. But it appears to be just an 1/8 of an inch that's not clearing that little lip on that piece of metal on the front of the body. So there's the metal brace piece that I've been telling you about. What I've done, it's got 6, that's the right hand side, there's 3 more on the left hand side, just same positions. And I've taken and I've connected this to the bumper with those 6 bolts. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill these holes here and here on this side, and then put a pop rivet in it so I can take those bolts out. Let's just do one. Hopefully it'll demonstrate what I'm trying to accomplish here. Now I'm pop riveting it from the bottom because I don't need a washer since I've got a heavy piece of metal there. Basically what this will do is once I've got the 4 pop rivets in, I can take these bolts out and the threaded nuts will be in a position to accept those bolts again once I've placed it in the, put it in the car, and I need to put the valance on the bottom of it, the part with the spoiler. That's what I always hate about pop rivets. They work well, but you have trouble pulling them out of the gun then. I'm going to have to go get a pair of pliers to yank that out of the gun. Okay, I just checked and I did use an all aluminum rivet, and that is part of the problem with getting them out. When you have all aluminum rivets, this tends to get chewed up and stuck inside the gun. So I'll repeat that for the 3 more holes I've got, and then I'll take these bolts that I've used to position it out so that I can put it on the car, and then I'll be able to bolt the valance on using these threaded nuts. One thing to mention here is when I put this on, it was kind of okay, but a couple of the dimples, again, were in inexact locations that resulted in, I lined up the ones that lined up and screwed it on, and then I put these in from this side, and they basically made their own hole through the fiberglass, actually just enlarged the hole through the fiberglass by themselves. So 3 more of those and it'll be ready to go on. So there's the bumper with 1, 2, 3, 4 rivets holding the plate in that has the screws for mounting the valance. And now that that's on, I can actually take off the bolts that I originally put in to line it up. I'll do the other 4 bolts off camera and they'll be ready to try to put on the car. Hopefully I can get that lip above that metal piece on the car without grinding it off. So I'm back at this front bumper and I was trying to investigate ways that possibly I could maybe move this, which contains the ridge I'm trying to get over the lip up there. And I thought, what if I loosened that and dropped this down, and then once it was over that lip, push it back up and tighten it. But then I came to this bolt right here, which it goes through a tab on the front fender. So once you get the bumper on, there's no way you're going to reach that to tighten it. So that's not the answer. Then I thought about, well, what if I loosened this bracket here that is what that bolt connects to. That's hard to see, but that is where it goes. And I thought, what if I drop that down? Well, if I loosen this bolt and let it move within this bracket on the bumper or on the fender, then maybe I could just leave this down a little further, this whole bumper, leave it down a little bit after I got it on, and I wouldn't have to loosen that bolt. But the problem with that is that bumper is a pretty tight fit on the bottom here, and I've added a metal plate which is going to make it even tighter, so I'm not sure that's going to work either. So I think I'm going to have to either somehow pull that lip up to get it over this other lip, the metal lip that's up here, or I'm going to have to shave a bit off of the thing. Once I try this again, maybe I will come to the conclusion that this can fit a little lower, but right now the way it looks, if I move that lower, then the bumper is going to be lower than the nose here. So I don't think that's the answer either. The other thing that I had to address was these brackets that are for the turn signal lights over there. Should I put them on before or after I put the bumper on, because it might be in my way. And what I determined, I think, is I'm going to have to take that bolt out right there, but that hole is going to go in that one there, and that will leave, once it's bolted up, a place for that screw that holds the light on to go through, and then the two down here that attach to the bottom of the light. So I think that's where they go. I don't think it makes a difference whether I put them on before or after, so I think I'm going to let it go till after, because it's only one bolt right here and that holds it on. I think I'll be able to do that with the bumper on. So I'm going to shut the camera off since I have limited working room here, and I'm probably going to be struggling with it. And I'll see what I can do about pushing that lip of that bumper over the lip on the top of the, I don't know if that's, I can't even see there, that lip right there. If I can get it over that, I should be able to get it on. Okay, I haven't bolted that in yet, but real progress. I've got all the screws lined up. I think I can make them all stick through enough to get a nut on them and then tighten them. And I found out what the problem was, and I'm going to have to raise the car up a little bit to show you, but it involves that area right there. There is a bolt that holds this bracket up to the front crash bumper. And my assumption, and you know what they say about when you assume, was that that bolt was going to be visible with the bumper on. Turns out, no, you had to get this metal brace that I riveted on the other day. That metal brace had to be covering it. So once I figured that out, and I guess it was kind kind of just a guess, because as I was putting it in and the top was getting close, this side on the edge right here, shed some light on it, this side right here wasn't even close. So I figured that's got to come closer. The only way that's getting closer is to cover that bolt with that bumper. And there you have it. So I'm going to raise the car up a bit and show you that, and then I'll get to putting nuts on all those studs and tightening it up. So this is the area that I was talking about right here. And I don't know if you can see it, but in there is the nut. And I guess a clue for me should have been that the metal brace actually has a notch in it to fit around it. So that was what was holding me up. So now that I've got it on, I'm going to try, and I'm probably going to do this off camera because it's going to be a long process, but up in there somewhere are a bunch of studs. I believe that's one right there, that are sticking through to some extent or another. I'm going to have to get those far enough in to get a nut on them and tighten them all up. So I'm going to put the camera down, turn on the radio, and chill while I do it. So I'm running into another little problem. Darn light is not good enough up in there to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me see if the light on the camera will shed some light on it. That where that stud is coming through, there's not enough room between it and the brace on the inside of it to get a nut on it. So I'm going to have to take the bumper off again and elongate the hole on the bumper rather than the one in the on the car, and move it, both of them at the curve, towards the outside of the car. After that, all the other ones appear to be accessible, and I'll be able to get the nuts on those. But these two, unfortunately, that's not a good picture on the camera, but the point is that there's a lot of room towards the outside of the car in the slot for it to move. And there's a better picture. So I can move it over a bit, and actually it really doesn't matter if that hole in that bumper is a slot. But I'm going to have to move it over so that I can get a nut on it to be able to pull it in. And then everything ought to be pretty good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my die grinder and I'm going to enlarge those slots, like I said, towards the outside of the car. Okay, that should be plenty enough. And now when I put the studs in, they will be further towards the outside of the car, and they should line up perfectly. Well, I decided to try and show me mounting this. So I was moving the camera and I left the bumper sitting on, I just had it on some trash cans, and it fell off while I walked away. Took a little chunk out of it. So I guess I'll have some fiberglass work in my future. Okay, what I think I've learned is that you've got to start with this bumper way under, and then pull it up in the center to get it over. And I'm getting my fingers caught in there. And then, once you get it over, you gotta make sure the studs are lined up, and they do move when you're trying to put it up against this. So I do have some picks with hooks on them that you can grab and adjust those studs a little bit. There. So apparently those two slots that were not quite lined up, or they were giving me a little resistance because they weren't hitting the hole in the center. That actually kept the bumper a little bit away from the fender, or the nose, I guess I should say. But now I'm quite sure that I will be able to get those nuts on there because I'll have more room. So I can actually reach a couple of them already. I can tell that I could not reach before I enlarge those holes. So I'm going to go back to underneath the car and putting all those nuts on those studs and give you an update when that's done. What you're looking at here is the inside of the left front driver's side bumper to front clip attachment, and the toughest bolt to get to is up behind this right there. Let me see if I can get the light on it better. Right behind there. It took me a while to get it, but I got it. And then there are two studs. I'm going to have to lift the camera, but there's one there and one a little bit below it, and I'm holding the camera with both hands so you can see them, so I can't point to it. But there's those, and then the rest, not too bad to get at. They're behind. I have to hold the camera again. Try to do it with one hand here. They are up behind this lip. There's one there that you can maybe see a little bit of right there, and then this was the one I had trouble with. I had to extend the slot in the bumper in order to get that through. That's it, right at the curve of the nose. Now, there's two I haven't put the nuts on them yet. They are up inside the very front of the nose. Let's see if I can get a camera up there. I don't know if I can. You can see the lip. They're right up in here. Those are the only two I don't have on yet. But they don't look to be too hard to get to. And then it repeats itself on the passenger side. One at the corner of the bend, two across the top, one way in the corner that's hard to get to, and two down the side of the bumper. So what I did to get those difficult ones in was I took my socket, little piece of paper towel, put the paper towel on the socket, put the nut in so that the nut wouldn't fall out the minute I tipped the socket down. And then I used the socket to reach behind that, and I had to wiggle both hands up in there so that I had one guiding me onto the stud and then the other tightening it. That would have been, since the socket's in my right hand, that would have been the way I did the passenger side, but it would have been reversed for the driver's side. But that worked. I'm going to use this same technique to get to the ones up in the center that I haven't done yet. Maybe I'll leave the camera run. I don't know. This tripod isn't very high, and it makes it difficult to see there. Those are not the studs. Those are on an emblem. But oops. Basically what I'm going to try to do is put that socket with the nut in it on an extension and then use that to start the nut onto the stud. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here, but that's basically it. I believe I have it started on one of those studs. And now I did use the power ratchet on ones that were hard to reach. This one, I've got it, I think, pretty much tightened with my hand, so I am going to use a little bit of a ratchet action on it, but I see that only being a turn or two, so I'm not going to bother with the power. But the fit on that bumper isn't great. I would say it's a little bit too short to match up with the sides of the front clip nicely, but it's going to have to do since that's what it is. So I will repeat that same process on the other stud in the front, and that front bumper skin will finally be on.